All right, guys. So we talked about one of the worst franchises to ever fall from grace. Now it's time to talk about the second franchise to fall from grace, which is Lord of the Rings, aka Rings of Power, which apparently is now officially, guys, a massive flop for Amazon. Now we've had a lot of news outlets try to spin this in favor of Amazon because they're being paid out the wazoo for their access media stuff. But guys, it's official. They've spent almost $1 billion just on the first 2 seasons of the show alone.
And we were doing some math yesterday. If they actually finish this off, it'll be closer to $2 billion by the time they're done.
Yes, indeed, because they got 3 more seasons that they've committed to, right? So with this one, this article in the Daily Mail talks about how in the first season, only 36% of people who began watching the show actually finished the first season. And then the season premiere of season 2, only half as many people tuned in to watch that. And the fall off was just as steep. And so the article actually kind of goes in about how, like, because Jeff Bezos was such a fan of Lord of the Rings, he didn't care about spending his money to get TV rights to it. But then they hired these no-name writers from the Roberto Orci School of Screenwriting and the Bad Robot Incubator and all this other stuff. Basically, the most unqualified people on the face of the planet to shepherd one of the most beloved franchises on the face of the planet. But in addition to that, I actually read through the comments on this article, which were even more interesting than the article itself, because basically the consensus was, hey, you hired people who basically turned Lord of the Rings woke, and none of the Lord of the Rings fans wanted that. They just wanted a faithful representation of what the books were. And for some reason, Hollywood just can't seem to figure that out. So, Odin, I want to throw this to you first and foremost, because I want to talk a little bit about the financial aspects of this. Now, we don't know how Amazon makes money off of this necessarily, because they're spending a lot of money to produce this original series, but it's not really pulling in a lot of people into the Prime ecosystem. And there are actually cheaper ways to create shows that get people to actually sign up for this type of thing. But it's also not keeping them subscribed to the Prime ecosystem. So the question becomes is this just a money pit for Amazon based off of Jeff Bezos' fandom, essentially? So I want to get your take on this. Do you think that this is a massive financial disaster for Amazon?
As you kind of hit on there, it's really hard to quantify because they're obviously spending a lot of money on this and wasting it because no one in the grand scheme of things is really watching it. As far as whether or not it's a huge hit for them, there's a lot of things you have to consider because Amazon is a massive corporation, right? Every time I bring up Amazon and I bring up like a multi-billion-dollar corporation, people usually jump in to say probably closer to like $1 trillion corporation. It's huge, right? It does so much. And so, though it's definitely losing money in regards to the show because the show is not actually bringing people in, when it comes to Amazon as a brand, think about this. How many people are pissed off by this show and are therefore going back now to read the original novels? How many of them are now buying those novels off of Amazon.com? How much does Amazon get from those sales? Again, these are questions in my head because it is something that has to be thought about, right? That, yes, they're clearly not making money specifically from this show as far as direct people coming to watch the show, signing up for Amazon Prime specifically for this service. Because remember, you get Prime Video service just by having an Amazon Prime membership. And most people who have Prime are not watching this show or do not care about this show because they only care about getting their free shipping and their other deals like with the Amazon Prime deals, etc. Right? And I think the best metric also to kind of look and see how fewer people are watching this show is even just looking to critics. And I pointed this out before, but on Rotten Tomatoes, if you look at the first episode of the first season, Rotten Tomato critic reviews was 162 for episode 1. You jump to episode 1 of season 2, 14 reviews. So clearly they were either paying people to write the reviews, or at the very least, the best case scenario is that, okay, a lot of people that initially had interest no longer have any interest in this show. And so even just the audience out of it for a second, when you talk about professional critics, this show is definitely trying to be made more so for that type of class of person. If they're not even watching this stuff, that tells you a lot.
Tom, you want to say something?
Oh, I was just saying, it all costs us $50 for a good review. Remember
that.
Well, Rob, I'll throw this to you because I know you have a lot to say, but you famously hate the Goonies and you liked Joker too, so you must love Rings of Power.
No.
So I would like to know what your thoughts are on this.
Wait, you thought I said I like Rings of Power?
Yes.
Oh no,
You must. You
no,
must. You hate
no, no.
Goonies and you like
No,
Joker
I
too.
think
Good.
the I just want to point something out. I think Joker 2 is a spectacularly well-made movie that the filmmakers made exactly the film that they wanted to make. And that to me is a success. I think it was the film that the audience least wanted to see, perhaps in the history of Hollywood. So I want to just clarify that. I will forever love that movie for that reason. I was stunned after I saw Joker 2. Stunned. I couldn't believe it got made. And neither now can Warner Brothers. But anyway, so what I wanted to say, I think all of these franchises have the same problem that Disney with Star Wars, with Amazon with Rings of Power, and Paramount with Star Trek, they all have the same problem. And it's all a creative problem. And the thing is, when people buy an IP and you're constrained to only tell stories that are in the appendices of Lord of the Rings about a time that's 1,000 years before the very thing. And by the way, to a certain extent, Dune Prophecy has the same problem too. You want to tie it into the thing that's really successful, like Lord of the Rings. So immediately, well, how can we shoehorn Gandalf into this story? Well, Gandalf's not even supposed to be in Middle Earth at this point. It doesn't matter. We'll put him in there. And once you start making those decisions, a story about what happened in Middle Earth 1,000 years before the during the Second Age could have been a really interesting story. If you had writers that said, if Middle Earth was England and say the Middle Ages, but a mythical England, Tolkien wanted to create a myth for the UK. What would happen in the equivalent of where was human history 1,000 years before that? Like what was the world like before that? And that's, you look to that and go, how can we base a story? We've got things like Morgoth and the rise of, even the time frame in Rings of Power is not consistent with what Tolkien was writing about. So you're making a show that does nothing but compromise the original author's work all across the board because you're trying to make it acceptable from a monetary standpoint. We have to give the audience what they want. We have to give them Gandalf. That kind of thinking is wrong from the get-go. And Star Wars is suffering because of it. Star Trek is suffering because of it. Everybody's like going back, or everybody's retconning things. And the audience is going, you're supposed to be creating this stuff and you guys are doing it wrong. And everybody knows that. And when you watch Rings of Power, it's like, look at what they did to the character of Galadriel. There is no place in any of Tolkien's work that portrays Galadriel the way she's portrayed in Rings of Power. And so the audience knows when you're watching that movie that the creators of the show are lying to their audience. They're lying to the audience. The creators are just taking whatever they want. And once you know that the creators of whatever show you're watching or the movie you're watching are lying to you, people tune out. The thing about stories is the best fiction is truthful. That's how I've always looked at it. The best fiction, we believe it. And when people can't make fiction that's truthful, it doesn't work. And all of our franchises, Doctor Who, it's all suffering from the fact that these creators want to inject rather than be true and faithful to the very franchises they're working in. They're like, you know what? There's room to make these franchises better and more inclusive and more acceptable and more. So their first impulse, these creators' first impulse is to change things. And to me, they are the wrong people. And maybe on a spreadsheet, like Simon Kinberg, he's worked on all this stuff, all this great stuff, but he wasn't the only one responsible for the success of the things that he worked on. Look at the things he directed himself. Look at X-Men Dark Phoenix. Look at all this stuff. On a spreadsheet, he's worked on all these things. So a corporation goes, oh yeah, Simon Kinberg can take over Star Wars. Can he? Really? I understand he's got a spreadsheet, a CV that looks good, like Akiva Goldsman. He's got a spreadsheet that looks good. He won an Academy Award, but he won an Academy Award for adapting somebody else's work. Now, there's a lot of other things on his CV, like the New Line Lost in Space. Should we give him Star Trek because of that?
Batman and Robin.
Invasion.
They don't look at that. They don't think that way. And what I don't understand, it should be, I don't give a rat's ass what you've worked on previously or how much money, things that you've made. I need you to come in and pitch me a story. You need to tell me, at least this is what I think executives should do. everything else, if you want to make a spec project, you have to go pitch it, and you have to convince an executive. And the thing is, this is the kicker: the executives that they're pitching to, they don't know. They don't know these franchises. Kathleen Kennedy doesn't know Star Wars. She knows the people that made it, but she's never sat down and analyzed it. She doesn't have Steve Sansweet's Star Wars Encyclopedia. She hasn't sat there and read Dark Horse comics. She hasn't played Knights of the Old Republic. She hasn't done any of this.
Well, Rob,
So
there's no
she's-
source material for Star Wars.
I know. And the thing is, all of us Star Wars fans, Jason Solo, Asajj Ventress, take your pick, Darth Revan, who the Hot Toys has made. I mean, even the toy companies know what fans want more than the studios. And this is the real problem. The people in charge of these franchises, one, don't know the franchises well enough to make a decision. So they're hiring people that on spreadsheets look good. Whether those people, even if they do know the franchise, they come in, they're like, I want to change it.
Yeah, and Rob, speaking of people who don't know the franchise, I want to throw this to Brian real quick. So, Brian, we have these two guys, J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, who were handed the keys to this Lord of the Rings kingdom. Now, famously, these guys are from the Bad Robot Incubator. When Roberto Orci was partnered with Robert Kurtzman, or Alex Kurtzman, I should say, they wrote the first two Star Trek films, and then Roberto Orci was going to go write the third Star Trek film and direct it. And these were the two guys who he basically farmed the script out to. And their script was so bad, famously, Paramount said, we're not making this movie. And so these are the guys that Amazon then chose to write and produce the Rings of Power. So, you're a Star Trek guy. You knew about this way before they got hired at the Rings of Power. What do you think is going through their head when they say, okay, here's $1 billion, go and make Lord of the Rings, to two guys who've never made anything before, and the stuff that they did almost get made was so bad that it just didn't get made?
Yeah, I don't know. What's the head of Amazon Studios? What's her name?
Jennifer Salke.
Jennifer Salke. I think she's a star effer, bro. She just really wants to be near talent that is being spoken about. She wants to play in the studio's sandbox. And I'm not sure why they choose creatives that have nothing to back up their talent, but it seems like a lot of it is who you know and not what you know over there. Now, to be fair, Amazon Studios makes some pretty good shows.
Yep.
They really do. But then they make some really bad shows too. And it's pretty hit or miss. I loved Reacher. I thought it was phenomenal. And I think it's all about who they pick. Citadel is another example of a show that cost way too much money. And they just had the wrong people involved.
What was that Chris Pratt show where he's like the Navy SEAL or whatever? That was really good.
The Kill List.
Yeah, it's good. Terminal List, you mean? Right?
Yeah.
Terminal
Yep.
List,
Yep.
yeah.
Terminal List was great. Yeah, so like you hire, I think they get lucky when they hire the right talent and they create a good stuff, and they obviously let their creatives do whatever they want, and that's why you have these extreme examples of really, really good and really, really bad shows. And I think that they must just be hands off. They're like, oh, these guys they were suggested to us. They're in the right circles. There's a lot of buzz about them. Let's get them in here. They're passionate and they can do their own thing. Maybe I hate to say maybe there needs to be some studio oversight because I hate it when studios get involved, but someone needs to, helm the ship. Someone needs to be helming the Lord of the Rings franchise, the stories that they have. They need like a James Gunn or a Kevin Feige, Peter Jackson, whatever. They need someone that can be like, no, this is not what Lord of the Rings is, or we need to button up this or change this or whatever. They need someone in charge, not just, what? You're being talked about today. You seem to be talent everyone wants to get their hands on, even though you've done nothing of value. Good luck with the $1 billion franchise. Same with Citadel. I mean, honestly, the actors involved, great. Nothing wrong with them whatsoever. Priyanka Chopra is absolutely stunning. But the writing was horrendous. Like, it just seemed like that entire show seemed like what a high schooler would write as a spy thriller. It
And then
lacked
that's a show
any
that
substance.
basically had to be completely reshot, just like Solo did.
Yeah, and there was so little going on in this huge, expansive show. It was shocking.
And they've had 2 foreign language spin-offs so far, and I don't even know if anyone's watching those, which is
Yeah.
kind of
No.
weird.
You
But
know what?
Miss,
Can I just say
go ahead,
quickly?
real quick, Rob.
You know, Lord Miller got fired from directing Solo because Lawrence Kasdan didn't like the fact that they were doing lots of improv and changing the script. That's basically what happened. I don't know if the movie they were making wouldn't have been a hit. I mean, I mean, we'll never know. But Lord and Miller, you know, they're responsible for the Into the Spider-Verse franchise. I love their, you know, 21 and 22 Jump Street. Those movies were hilarious. And maybe they were actually doing what Star Wars needed to be done. I can only imagine what that cast was doing. It's just everybody was so horrified that we're making a Star Wars film. And they let it go as long as they went, so something was working. It's not like nobody was looking at dailies.
88 days is
Yeah.
what I was told by Clint Howard. But I mean, I agree to a point. Maybe that movie would have been better, Rob, but I think that movie was doomed to fail no matter what because of The Last Jedi and because nobody wanted a Solo.
Well, yeah, and once you've seen old Han,
Yeah.
the real Han Solo, why would you want? They should have led with a kick-ass Boba Fett
Yeah,
movie.
but getting back to Lord of the Rings, Mr. Butters, one of the interesting things about this cycle is basically every time a new season of Lord of the Rings comes out, there are complaints that it's not faithful to Tolkien because they're wokeifying it and putting in diversity and inclusion and equity and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And then the actors who were cast for that very reason then come out and start attacking the fans, calling them racist, calling them sexist, calling them all this stuff. And it happens like clockwork every time a new season comes out when, you know, you've got this,
Yes,
this
sir.
new, you know, wokeified version of Tolkien. Do you think Hollywood is ever going to learn that attacking the people who watch your show and consume your products is a good idea?
Well, no, it doesn't seem like they are anyway, right? I mean, you know, look at this. You know, I haven't gone too deep into it, but look at like the Snow or the Wicked stuff. I mean, aren't they doing the same thing, going out there and clutching their pearls and you know and saying how great everything is with their diversity and all this stuff and trashing the MAGA supporters and stuff. I don't know. It just seems like that. No, they're not learning, but they're going to have to at some point, right? Or aren't they? I don't understand these people's and their publicists. Do these people's publicists not go, you can't say this, don't go here, don't do that? You know, what are they doing? Isn't that their job? I don't get it. You know, and when it comes to this Lord of the Rings stuff, I didn't even bother watching season 2. Did we watch the first episode for this show?
We watched the first episode.
Yeah, I don't even remember. I don't even remember. You know, it's just not good. So if the trend keeps going, nobody's going to be watching the show by the time season 4 comes out, and you know, season 3 will have 5% from the people that watch season 1. It's just atrocious. It's just an absolute huge waste of money and time and effort. And
Well, I mean, you know, if you think about it, a show like Breaking Bad, which shows a man's descent, he breaks bad, watching a man's corruption,
right,
is a far better examination of what evil can do than Rings of Power. And really, you're kind of dealing with the same kind of story, you know, in terms of corruption and evil. And the thing about Breaking Bad is it's a brilliantly written show, brilliantly conceived. And it was Vince Gilligan had cut his teeth on television. He goes back all the way to the X-Files. He's a creator that demands respect because he's earned it. And he's got a quarter century in television before he made Breaking Bad. And these guys haven't done anything. And it's like they're given the reins of power on Rings of Power. And what have they done to earn it? And the stories they're telling are not, they're not honest. It's not, fiction has to be truthful and honest. And if you have creators, it's evident within, look, you could tell Rings of Power was not good in the first 2 episodes. I mean, Lord of the Rings, the movie, Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, you have a 5-minute prologue that takes your breath away. And then the next 10 minutes when Gandalf rolls into the Shire, you're in.
Yep.
You're locked in. 15 minutes into Lord of the Rings, you know where you are. You know it's at stake, the Shire. You know, really, it's the hearth. Home is where the hearth is, or heart is. You know what Frodo and Sam are off to do. You know exactly what the stakes are and exactly where that movie's going, and you are locked in. And what is the first thing that Frodo says? You're late. A wizard is never late, Mr. Frodo. You know, he appears exactly. You love those two guys with their first exchange of dialogue.
It's true.
And speaking of loving dialogue, Tom, one of the interesting things about this article that the Daily Mail published was about how basically Amazon made decisions to shoot in New Zealand and the UK based off of tax credits. And that's the only reason we know how much they've been spending on this type of stuff. And I'm actually kind of surprised that the season 2 budget was way higher than this first season budget, considering they had to create all the sets and the costumes and stuff like that. You'd think that it'd be cheaper going along, but it seems to have gotten more expensive. And that's because they not only moved the shoot to the UK, which is more expensive in general, even though they got tax credits, but they also bought their own studio in the UK to shoot out of. So what's your take on this? Do you think Amazon's just throwing good money after bad at this point?
Well, I mean, when it comes to like, okay, so like in a network setting, it's kind of well known that the news is like the one thing that kind of is a loss leader for the network, right? The news doesn't necessarily make money. It usually everything else kind of amortizes that. It's kind of the same thing I think here with Amazon, because we don't know how they're making money on any of this stuff. Sure, we can sit here and say they spent $1 billion, $2 billion on this, but until we actually see how the money is made or how they figure the money is made on this, we don't know. I mean, every other show on Amazon Prime right now could be amortizing this show as a loss leader, is kind of this prestige thing they have, because that's just it. At this point, what are you doing besides just trying to save face? Because we've heard rumors and other things here and there. You know, the original idea was that they're signed up for 50 episodes, but now George Molo has heard from somebody in at Amazon that says that's not necessarily the case. And we know from, the Star Trek Discovery situation with Netflix had initially signed on for 5 seasons, but by season 3, they were trying to get out of the deal. And at this point, I think it makes you wonder, how long will it be before Amazon goes, okay, we've done enough episodes now where we can just pay them off and kind of quietly cancel this without losing any more money? Or is it something that it's just another drop in the bucket for them and it doesn't matter? Because like you said in the intro part, like, how many books is this selling? How many other avenues and things? Because Amazon isn't set up like Netflix and all the other streamers. Because you're right, you get Amazon Prime as part of your package deal with, other things, unless you do it separately. I think you can do a separate video deal, but like, again, it's still kind of like mixed together with their main Amazon stuff. And Amazon's one of the biggest things ever in the history of ever. So, I mean, we have no idea how they're calculating this. They could just continue to sink more money in this because Bezos wants to do this because it's his baby. But I mean, have you guys ever seen the movie Moving with Richard Pryor?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I feel like happened here is Bezos went in to buy Lord of the Rings, and he didn't realize, just like Saul Zahn's company thought that they had all these rights, and Warner Brothers like, no, you don't. That they thought they were buying this Lord of the Rings thing, and when they got it there and they realized all the stuff that they said they were taking with them got taken with them. They weren't kidding, because they don't have all this stuff. And the scene I'm talking about is Richard Pryor goes to look at this house, and they keep looking at everything. Is, oh, this pool is beautiful. He's like, yeah, we know, we're taking it with us. And they kept, joking about it. And then when they get to the house, they realize the entire house is stripped of everything. The pool, the cupboards, the doors, the windows, everything has been taken that they said they were going to take with them. And I feel like that's what happened to Amazon. And now they're just trying to pretend that they have this house that they sunk this money into and they're happy with it when they're really not. Like, let's be real. I can't see anybody who this is a win for at the end of the day.